Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on the Craft of the Draft channel. Today we're going to be doing a position audit on the rebounding defenders, and we're going to be looking at the following players: Toby Travalia, Lockie Jakes, Harry Oliver, Angus Clark, Lucas Campell, Luuka Gregor, Jayden Yan and Zack Johnson. A fair few of them in this draft class. We know those rebounding defenders often do become midfielders at the next level in certain scenarios as well, and they can certainly graduate onto a wing later in their career. The skills that we believe are the most important for this position, so we're going to be critiquing them on, are speed, ball use, strength, decision-making, intercepting, composure, cleanliness, and their contested work. We'll start with Toby Travalia, who's probably seen as the best in this category, and he has a little bit of everything. He's very clinical in lots of areas. I think that's what really stands out about him. You don't necessarily think of him as a contest player, but his contest stuff is really competitive. He's quite clean. He's not necessarily quick, but he reacts really quickly, has those fast twitch fibers, and that allows him to do certain things that sort of get him ahead of the game and set the game up really well. And his ball use is very good as well, and he's put on a lot of size, so he's got that deceptive strength about him, and his decision making is a real weapon.
Yeah, well summed up. There's nothing to add in terms of, I think he ticks every box here, the best out of everyone. I'd almost put him into my top 10, and he probably sits at that 10, 11, 12 ranking for me. And it's the strength as well. It's really deceptive that he's not as, he doesn't have a massive build, but he competes so well against anyone bigger than him, even smaller than him. I think it's that versatility. You can run him into the midfield. He's a game changer. He's one that you have on his team. You have to keep a watch on him, and that's great for a team to have that luxury where you have the opposition needing to worry about that type of player. So he'll thrive at the next level.
The perfect halfback, I think. Harry Oliver is the next one we'll talk about. So there were some categories where there were 3 categories where I ranked him a 5. I'm not sure if there was any other player across this whole thing where I ranked them 5 out of 5 for 3 categories, but ball use was a 5 for me. He finds teammates really well. Also a 5 for me was his contest work. He goes in like a bull at a gate, and that's really clear. And his composure as well to make the right decisions was really strong for me. And he's quite clean and strong as well, so it's really hard to fault him in any area.
Yeah, and those are 3 good categories to put him in the 5 as well. I think his intercepting is also there as well. We saw that at times. He certainly understands when to go in. And like you said, with the contest, I think it goes hand in hand at times, that he'll understand when to put his body on the line for certain things. And that decision-making out of the back half can be really clinical for any side you're in. I mean, he was obviously in a side stacked in the Sandy Dragons, but that you could just see how much better it made them, even with a player like that. But for any club to have that type of player, I think he'll slot in really well at the next level. And it's something the modern game wants as well, that quick players who are ready to move the ball forward in transition.
Angus Clark from South Australia, the next one. He's got some really likeable attributes to him. I think what was clear to me doing this list is he's quite balanced, and there wasn't too many categories that I could really mark him down. Maybe strength and contest a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think he's got a really good bounce to him in terms of his ability to read the play, to intercept, to move it forward. I think there's a lot to build on his game, but I think when he builds into his builds into his body, he'll become a really nice bouncy interceptor that can play really well one-on-one as well. So he's got a lot of flexibility in the back half, and one that I quite like. I think he plays a different type of role to these players, but he plays it really well at the same time.
We'll move on to Lockie Jakes now from the Geelong Falcons. For me, his composure really stands out to make the right decisions. His intercept marking is really good for a medium sort of defender, and he's also very good with his ball use as well. And I guess in terms of areas to be critical of, maybe haven't seen as much of him in terms of in the contest, so that a little bit, but that's probably through underexposure more than anything else. But he certainly does have a little bit of strength to him, and I think it's going to hold him in really good stead. His speed as well, not necessarily with the leg speed, but his ability to set the game up and be able to set up for transitions probably compensates for that. Yeah,
he's a good ball mover outside of defensive 50, especially from that kick-outs times. I think he worked on that game a lot earlier in the year. We saw a lot later in the year his ability to impact in contest as well. But he's quite an athletic player, which I always say I don't think we saw a lot of it this year. And I think that's a lot of untapped potential for a player like him to have. He's got a great leap. I think you can rely on him in other ways as well. But I agree with what you said there. He's quite smart with the way he uses it and the way he's played into his role. I think he was quite under the radar to start the year, and he's built really well to expose himself and put himself in great positions.
The National Combine invite probably validates that for sure. Jayden Yan, the Essendon NGA prospect. The next one we'll talk about, speed is an area which is really strong for him. His contest work we saw, he went through the midfield and was really good in that last game that Calder played against Sandringham, really clean as well. And his ball use is something which is good. And the strength I think we saw develop throughout the season wouldn't have been a strength at the start of the year, but by the end of the year, I think we saw it a little bit more, which was really important.
Well, I think his season got turned a bit upside down at the start of the year when he was introduced to the academy by surprise. There was a lot of pressure on him. That experience, it felt like, didn't put him backwards, but it did kind of stunt the way he was growing, and especially into a position that was quite not new, but he was developing into his role with his built size that he had at the start of the year at half back. I don't think he was able to get into a good rhythm, but we saw it a lot later in the year, and it impacted his decision making in general throughout the year. But I think that speed, that run he produces, which I loved in his bottom age year on the win, was terrific. He can really assist moving into the forward half, which I liked about his game. Is an interesting one, Essendon NGA. I think they do take him.
Yep.
I think he's one you can develop quite well. But the question is, have you got too many guys similar in that role already at Essendon?
Zack Johnson, the next one we'll talk about. He's one who's really balanced. And again, it was hard to mark down in any area. Probably the one area was intercepting, which is really quite specialist to the halfback position. I see him as being someone who will clearly go into the midfield later in his career if he is drafted and has a medium to long-term career. Probably didn't see the intercepting as much this year from my point of view. And his composure is something that is there, but probably isn't as strong as some other components of his games. But that strength, decision making, and that ball use as well all really stand out. Particularly the ball use, I think, is quite underrated.
Well, I always rank players who defend as their number one priority quite high, and I think that's what he does well, which ties into that decision making aspect. The cleanliness part of it, like you said, questionable at times, but I do think what he produces is quite effective tactically. Whether it translates as a role at AFL level and what the game's asking for is probably where the question marks are. Does he have enough offensive output and enough speed and burst around stoppages to provide a bit more to his game? Because we know he's smart with the way he uses the footy, whether it translates to AFL standard game.
And then Carlton father-son prospect Lucas Camperelli. I guess the question marks come around his ability to kick the ball and really set the game up out of the back half, which is so important with the game so dictated by turnover at the moment. So that's an area he'll want to develop, but we have seen his intercepting and his ability to really rack the ball up off the half back line or even on the wing. Yeah,
well, he's played everywhere. I mean, they've gone into the middle as well. Him and Ben played together, Glenelg, and in that midfield. So he understands how to find the footy. I guess, it's the ball use at times, that's a question. But it's something that can be developed quite well, and I think when he does go to the Blues, they'll develop him as a half-back type. He's played time on the wing, but I think his game does suit out of the defensive 50 where he can be clean by hand and make good decisions, great work rate, great intensity. So I think you know what you're going to get. And there's still a good bit of development in Lucas left. And
then the last one is Luuka Gregor from the Western Jets. So his contest work, his strength is really strong. And then everywhere else was very solid as well. But yeah, we've talked about the fact before that he doesn't have any of those real weaknesses, but probably just doesn't quite have that standout strength. So yeah, it was a very balanced appraisal when it came to Gregor.
Yeah, he's a hard one. He's probably had a better season than we've said this than about 20 above him. But it's just the fact that we don't know if there's an established role for him at the next level. He's very smart. His contest work is great for his size. He knows how to play above his height at times. His decision making is fantastic. Speed is probably the question as well. Does he have that speed element? He's a smart player. I just think it's whether a club sees a good fit for him at the next level and what they want to make out of him. But he's a hard one to analyse in this, given that he's actually had quite a good season, but it's just the role that he plays, really.
Yeah, I mean, I look at everyone else on this list and I say they're all that rebounding type of defender, and they've shown that offensive element, whereas he's someone who is that locked down. So, I mean, it's a niche comparison, but someone like a Brady Hoff almost from the West Coast Eagles, who always takes the opposition's best small forward and tries to shut them out of the game. That's what he'll do. So it's quite hard putting him in these skill sets because he's going to be a much more defensively minded player, I think, if he gets drafted. So, yeah, he's an interesting one, but it's a good discussion, and there's a lot of players in contention for this draft class. It's one of the stronger ones of recent years, and lots of small/rebounding defenders to keep an eye on. So thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure to check out our other position audits if you haven't already, that have been released or will be released soon on our channel, and other content across YouTube and Instagram.